Good evening, friends. This evening I have a new tale for you from my collection of original works. Now it's time to grab a snack, dim the lights, and let me take you into the night with a story I call Threshold. The night was hot. A blistering dark extension of the dog days of August that let you know summer's got you by the short hairs. Swinging my legs from the bed, I glanced at the clock. 2:30 a.m. I've been lying here for over 4 hours, unable to sleep as the back of my head and neck sweated buckets onto the pillow. Sure, I would doze off for a few minutes, only to wake up what seemed 2 seconds later after having incoherent dream sequences. Flashes of real life mixed with the fantasies I play in my mind when I'm bored. Imagining myself lounging in an open-air bar in the tropics, drinking fruity rum concoctions and watching tan beauties stroll by in string bikinis. Except tonight, they were much different. I kept finding myself around a poker table with my buddies, talking about what happens when you die, feeling somehow, soon, I would know the answer. Sitting at the edge of the bed, I lit a cigarette and tried to sort it out. The dreams were a continuation of the conversation we had a few nights ago when we got together. Stan owns a meat packing plant on the east side and decided since it was so hot, we should all get together there this week and have our game in his walk-in cooler. It was a nice change from the heat. For once, the game wasn't interrupted while somebody headed to the fridge to get more beers. We just kept six-packs sitting on the floor by us, throwing the empties into the trash can in the corner and laughing when we missed as glass shattered, raining onto the floor. I watched the smoke from my cigarette drifting lazily up toward the fan spinning uselessly on the ceiling. Why am I wasting electricity to run the damn thing? All it does is move hot air around, making it feel like I'm standing in front of a blast furnace. I reach up to flick the ash from my smoke, but it sticks to my dry lips as I try to pull it away and my fingers slide down to the cherry, knocking it to the floor. The pain from the burn sends chills through me, which are almost welcome in the heat, as I reach down to grab the smoldering cherry from the floor and put it in the ashtray. It doesn't burn the tips of my fingers, though, as they are calloused. It reminds me again of the conversation. "It's okay now," Mike said. "That's what the kid told me as he was dying, and I swear he was smiling at me." We looked at one another, wondering if Mike was going to start crying as the sentiment seemed to well up in him, past the alcohol-softened emotional barriers all cops develop. He drained his beer and grabbed another. "Looking down at him," Mike continued, "I saw the holes in his chest, pulsing blood from where my bullets hit, and I knew there was nothing I could do. He was just a kid. No more than 18. Even though I had no choice since he drew on me first, I still regretted having to shoot him." "Sometimes it's just that way, Mikey," Tony said as he reached over and squeezed his shoulder, giving him a shake. "It was either you or him." Tony owns a small bar downtown, a quiet place where guys in business suits gather to talk about their latest deals and try to hook up with the more mature women they work with. Quite respectable, and not the sort of place where a bunch of cops and streetwise businessmen would gather for a night of beer and cards. At least not that you would know anyway. Each time it was Tony's turn to host our game, we were let in the back door directly from the parking garage to the private room he kept. Some would think he was ashamed to be seen with us, but then, they didn't know the real Tony. He's one of those guys that can easily mingle with any crowd, but deep down, he's from the streets like the rest of us. "Yeah, Mike, you shouldn't blame yourself," Phil said, lighting a cigar. "At least you know he won't be mugging any more little old ladies or kicking dogs." "But he smiled and said it was okay," Mike repeated. "And it seemed like he was looking right through me, like he could see what was beyond death." "There's nothing beyond death except blackness," Tony stated with conviction. Phil looked at him for a moment and set his cigar down before standing up. He ripped his shirt open to show off a pattern of scars on his chest. 9 holes in a rough circle represented the full load of buckshot which greeted him a few years ago during a raid. It was a miracle he was still alive at all, as a round of buckshot is the same as getting shot with 9 .32 caliber pistols at the same time. You see these scars? He asked, looking at Tony. I should be dead, and in fact was for a little while. The doctors pronounced me dead before I revived, and said I was gone for over 3 minutes. Ah, here we go again with the near-death experience again, Tony said as he raised his eyebrows and rolled his eyes. Mike seemed to hang on every word as Tony shook his head and drank from his beer. The bottle dripped a bead of sweat onto his chest, making a stain on his white shirt. It made me wonder how his beer could be colder than the cooler we sat in. Condensation only happens when the container is colder than the air around it. Then I saw my mama standing there, smiling just like she used to when I would come home, wringing her hands on her apron so they'd be dry when she hugged me. Phil smiled and seemed to drift off in the memory. I'm kind of surprised, Phil, Jerry said as he looked up from counting his chips. I heard that when death comes upon you suddenly and unexpected, you're confused and don't realize you died. Jerry's a used car salesman, which probably explains why he was counting his chips. None of us much cared if we won or lost at the friendly game, but he was always preoccupied by money. For him, a good night at the poker table was an affirmation of his abilities to make the right call. All in all, he was the odd one of the bunch, but everyone knew when the chips were down, Jerry had your back. He was a good friend. Well, it didn't really come on me unexpected, Jerry, Phil said through a cloud of smoke. As a cop, I expect to eat a bullet every time I walk out the door. I felt my wife roll over onto her back behind me and turned to look at her in the dim light reflected off the ceiling from the street 5 stories below. A trail of clothes led from the door of our bedroom to her nude body sprawled on the sheet, and I knew she slept hard. She was a smart one, having drank herself nearly to the point of passing out to escape the heat. Her creamy breasts undulated as she shifted positions, showing me my favorite flavor, nipple ripple, and I was tempted to reach out to her. When the phone rang, she didn't seem to notice as her soft, full breasts continued to rise and fall in a steady rhythm. McCalvey here, I said, putting the phone to my ear. Calvin, this is Lieutenant Nelson. His voice was strained like he was out of breath. We have a situation and need you to roll. What's happening, Lieutenant? I wondered why I was being called in when there was already another bomb squad commander on shift. We have a bomb downtown in the basement of a high-rise, he said quickly. The other team can't make heads or tails of it, and I need my best. Call me when you're rolling, and I'll fill you in. He hung up before I could say anything else, asshole. From the noise in the background, it sounded like there was an evacuation in progress, and I wondered just what kind of bomb I would have to disarm tonight. I wasn't surprised the other team couldn't handle it, and knew from experience it didn't take much to break their confidence. If it wasn't a clean, simple disarming, they would be the first to pull out and let it blow. That's when they called me for a second opinion, if there was time. There was obviously time tonight. I stumbled slowly to the bathroom to relieve myself, trying to push the image of my nude wife from my mind. Sure, it was too hot for sex tonight, and she was out like a light, but that didn't matter to my throbbing dick. I was stiff enough to cut diamonds and had to force myself to relax. It seemed to take forever for my erection to go away before I could piss without hitting my own face. There was no time for a shower. I splashed cold water over my neck and head, enjoying a few moments of relief from the heat, and headed back to the bedroom where I toweled off. I cast a glance at the bed and my wife. She had rolled onto her side with the top leg pulled up so her knee was nearly to her breasts, giving me a good view of her love nest. It seemed to smile at me as I noticed a few drops of sweat glistening in her fur, and I smiled back reflexively. Maybe I should take a few minutes to properly say goodbye. She wouldn't object, and in fact loved it when I woke her in that fashion. But they were counting on me. Somewhere out there, a madman unleashed his wicked intentions, and they needed me to rein him in. Still, I might regret passing the opportunity if I don't make it home again. I stuffed myself into a pair of boxer briefs with the promise that I would be back in time to properly wake my wife before she left for work, and turned to the closet where my uniform hung waiting. In the dim light, the uniform and gun belt reminded me briefly of the beef carcasses hanging in Stan's cooler, and I felt a chill run down my back as I was reminded of the conversation again. Well, I've heard that your whole life flashes before your eyes when you die, Stan said. Kind of like your brain is doing a memory dump and review. Why do you suppose that happens, Stan? Mike asked. I don't know, Stan thought for a moment. I was going to say that you empty your mind to be ready for the next stage and make room for that, but you keep your memories, so I don't know. I shook it off and grabbed a clean t-shirt from the shelf. I really didn't want to get dressed as I was hot, but I didn't think my boss would appreciate me showing up in shorts. I pulled on the starched pants and shirt, pressing the department patches down with my hand to make them lay flat. My gun belt felt good as it rested on my hips, even though it held no weapon. It carried my spare ammunition, flashlight, multi-tool, handcuffs, and pepper spray. Sliding the shoulder harness on, I quickly checked my weapon. Full magazine of 9mm Death and one in the chamber. I made sure the safety was on and slid it into the holster. Some would say it didn't make sense for a bomb squad cop to carry a weapon since bombs don't shoot back. But I had several occasions when the perpetrator returned to the scene, angry that his device had not detonated. Those were the stupid ones, like a kid who picks up a firecracker that didn't blow only to lose his finger from a slow fuse. They say ignorance kills. Boots, steel-toed, rubber-soled cowboy boots. I don't wear shoes except for running shoes because they make me feel naked and exposed. Boots protect my lower legs from anything I might walk through, and the tight leather gives added support to my ankles. I've tripped in the dark and twisted my ankle many times, but never once sprained or twisted them so badly I couldn't walk. I thank my boots for that. I turned them upside down and tapped the heels with my hand to shake out any uninvited guests, an old habit from when I lived in the desert where scorpions and black widows loved to hide in boots. Pulling them on, I feel complete. I am ready for whatever may come. I kiss my wife tenderly, and though she's sleeping, she kisses me back. Her full lips are soft and warm. I gently squeeze her breast and slip a finger through her love smile as I tell her I love her. She reaches up to hold me for a moment before her arm relaxes and slides back to her side as she settles into deep sleep. I am loved. I turn to leave, casting a quick glance back at her. I will have this vision of her in my mind until I come home. I make my way quietly through the apartment to the kitchen. It's 2:45 in the morning, but I decide I want a beer. I'm technically off duty. At least I was before the phone rang, and who's to know if I drank it before or after the call came in. Besides, it's not like I'm going to get drunk on one beer. I pop the top on a bottle of my favorite dark lager beer and drink deeply. The cold feels great in my hand and my stomach, and I slide the bottle across my forehead. Lighting another smoke, I take a long, deep drag, relishing the combination of beer and cigarettes. I don't know why, but a smoke is always better with a beer, and a beer is always better with a smoke. I down the beer, drop the bottle in the trash, and go back to the fridge for a can of tomato juice. As an afterthought, I grab a second beer for the road. I have a feeling this is going to be a hell of a night. Opening the front door, I take a pull from the beer and start to walk out when I notice the door sill. For some reason, the conversation at the poker game comes back to me again as I step across the threshold. The night is hot. One blistering dark continuation of the dog days of August that lets you know summer's got you by the short hairs. The sky above is dark, but I can't really see it through the lights of the city. The van starts easily, and as I ease out onto the empty street, I'm finishing the second beer. I roll down the window and drop the bottle into the trash can at the curb as I go by. The can is empty and the glass shatters as it hits the bottom. I smile. I don't know why, but I have always liked the sound of breaking glass. Maybe that makes me strange. I don't know, but I do like it. I leave the window rolled down and turn off the air conditioning. I don't know if there will be air conditioning in the basement where I'm headed to disarm the bomb, but if there is not, cooling down will only increase my discomfort there. As an afterthought, I hit the button to roll down the passenger window, too. My duty van clearly says police department on the side, so I'm not too worried about carjackers, although they have been known to target cops from time to time. I pop the top on the tomato juice as I dial the lieutenant. I make sure to drink some before I speak to him. Why? I'm not sure, because there's no way you can smell beer over the phone. Perhaps it's just my nature. Lieutenant Nelson, he answers on the first ring. McAlvey here, I said, waiting. Calvin, good. He seems relieved. The bomb squad here says they have never seen a device like this before. It has a timer set to go off in 5 hours. I look at my watch. Detonation scheduled for 8 a.m. Rush hour will be underway and the downtown area will be packed with traffic, making emergency response impossible. How big's the package? I asked. I needed to get a handle on what we were dealing with. About the size of an overnight bag, Nelson sounded unsure. Roughly 1.5 feet high, 2 feet long, and 10 inches thick. And what explosive? The bomb squad guys say they're not sure, Nelson paused. Some type of plastic explosive, but the chemical composition isn't exactly one type or another. Okay, I said, expressing more confidence than I felt. Give me the location and clear everybody else out. I scratch on my dash pad as he reads the address off. Great. The bastards have put the bomb in the very heart of the city. I punch the address into my dashboard computer and get a map of the area. I knew at first glance this bomb was meant to be more than just a way to damage the target building. The location is an 85-story high-rise with businesses on the lower floors, apartments up to the floor 80, and the top 5 floors were the largest television network in the area and several radio stations. The building's location was a prime spot for communications, as it has a clear line of sight to the relay towers nearby. Next door to the apartment building, the main hospital shares the parking garage built between them. While structurally they are separate buildings, their proximity is such that a violent movement of either building will negatively affect the other in a serious way. Directly across the street from the main tower of the high-rise are several smaller but still relatively tall buildings containing banks and other businesses. And the coup de grace? On either side of the high-rise are the municipal court with city jail in one building and the county courthouse, sheriff's department, and county jail in another. If this building goes, the city will come to a standstill. I light another smoke and concentrate on the road. I'm only 5 minutes away from the high-rise, but time is slowed to a crawl. Street lights seem to take forever, and the only other traffic, trash trucks and street sweepers, seem to be making it a point to pull out in front of or otherwise slow me down. I bite down on the cigarette filter to release my frustration as I wait for a big rig to finish backing across the street in front of me to a loading dock. It's not the driver's fault that I happen to come along at this hour. In fact, he's actually acting pretty smart by bringing his load in during the early hours when there's no traffic. It does little to ease my tension. Finally, I see the lights of the emergency vehicles ahead and flip on the lights of my van. The officers at the barricade see who it is and wave me through frantically. I'm not the only one to realize the situation is dire. Outside the barricades, people are lining the streets to watch. Don't these people have lives? Do they ever sleep? It would seem not, as the flashing of emergency vehicle lights draws them like flies to a shit wagon. They don't realize if the bomb goes off, their position is hopeless. A line of barricades funnel me into an underground entrance and I pull my van into the building. Why not? If I can't stop the bomb, I wouldn't have time to get back to my van, nor to negotiate an escape through the barricades. There is no turning back until the job is done. The basement of the high-rise is organized into a secure parking area with utility stations around the perimeter. In the middle is a large concrete center shaft, some 40 or 50 feet square, which houses the utility shaft and elevator shafts up to the main level. To this center shaft, ducts and pipes from the utility stations feed the heart of the building. Of course, the bomb is somewhere deep in the center shaft, which is also a major structural member for the whole building. The floor trusses hung from the outer walls to the center shaft, which means if it collapses, everything it supports will come crashing down violently. I grab my toolbox and head for the entrance to the center shaft. Lieutenant Nelson is just inside and leads me over to the bomb squad. Their commander, Brian Gentry, sticks out his hand in greeting. Transferring the cigarette from my hand to mouth, I shake his hand. His effeminate grip belies his surname. McAlvey, sorry to wake you this morning, but we have a bad one here. He seems honestly relieved to have the help. "Morning, Gentry," I said through the smoke of the cigarette. "From the sound of it, the size of the package is not that impressive. Any particular reason it couldn't be loaded onto the disposal rig and relocated to a safe detonation site?" "I thought of that too, but the package is bolted to the floor and the heads of the bolts were ground off, making removal without using impact tools or torches impossible." There was no smugness in his voice. He was being factual. "Okay, let's take a look," I said and started toward the cordoned-off area. Gentry and his team began to follow. I turned around. "Just you and I, Gentry." We approached the bomb, and like the lieutenant said, it looked like an overnight bag. In fact, that's just what it was on the outside. The other team had already opened the top, and I could see the bomb as I walked up. Son of a bitch. We were dealing with someone who seriously wanted to cause destruction. As Gentry said, the bomb itself was bolted down to the concrete, and there were even bits of concrete dust inside the suitcase from the drilling to place anchors. The bolts were ground off in such a way as to maintain strength while making it impossible to remove them. The bomber was a genius, obviously mad, clearly bent on destruction, but a genius nonetheless, and he was not interested in games of cat and mouse with the authorities. His intention was to detonate the device, and he clearly felt no desire to prove his superiority or anything else. This was made clear by the construction of the device. Most bombers will construct a bomb using color-coded wires in order to keep track of what each wire is supposed to do. In this instance, every wire was white, no way to color code. The plastic explosive was sandwiched between a circuit board on top and another on the bottom. Whether or not the lower board was part of the circuit or just for assembly purposes could not be known without dismantling the device, which would detonate it. The detonating caps for the explosives were not attached to the circuits with wire, but soldered in as components to the circuit board. Presumably, the explosive was molded around them after the fact. While it was relatively easy to determine which contacts were the caps, there was no way of knowing if there was an alternate connection on the underside of the board to prevent the bomb from being disarmed by simply removing the circuit traces to the caps. Every electrical component used in making the bomb was completely devoid of any identifying marks. Normally, a technician can look at an integrated circuit chip and use the numbers to look it up in a database from the manufacturer. The database will have a picture of the chip which describes what's happening inside the chip and what each of its connections is. Not possible in this case. In several spots around the board were glass mercury switches. These switches have a little blob of mercury which moves when the switch is moved, either opening or closing contacts. Moving them from their current position, whether they kept a circuit open or closed, would be disastrous. Usually a technician could look at the switch and see whether it held a circuit opened or closed, and then bypass it by either shorting the leads together to keep them closed or clipping one lead to keep them open. The bomber painted the switches to prevent seeing their status. Also arranged at various points on the circuit board were photocells used to detect light waves, infrared light, X-rays, microwaves, and other energy sources. Without identifying marks, there was no way to know what these would detect, and thus no chance could be taken to use X-rays or other tools to examine the device. "Son of a bitch," I said as I backed slowly away from the bomb. "Gentry, let's go. No one touch this thing." I lit a cigarette as soon as I knew I was a safe distance from the bomb. In my head, I calculated the explosive force of the device. Looking back at its location, I realized it is sitting in the direct center of the support columns. The bomber intends to bring down the structural center of the building, and no doubt is convinced it will be sufficient to cause the collapse of the whole tower. I explained my theory to the lieutenant and Gentry along with the whole bomb squad. It's agreed the device cannot be safely disarmed, and our only option is to bring in the bomb shields. Great plan. Contain the bomb. The bomb shields are nothing more than high-tensile steel domes placed over an explosive device to contain the blast. They are made with several layers, and in between each layer are baffles leading to vent holes in the shell. When the explosive is detonated, the baffles slow the velocity of the blast wave, so that once they reach the outside of the shell, the force is insufficient to cause much damage. As far as I know, there have been no actual field tests of the bomb shields, only controlled laboratory tests. I advised the lieutenant to evacuate a 3-block radius around the tower. Then I remember the hospital. There's no way they could possibly totally evacuate the hospital. Staying inside the entrance to the central shaft, I look at the bomb and find myself wondering how the bomber managed to gain access and install the device. The central shaft entry was secured with 2 large steel doors, and the only other access would be down the maintenance stairs from the upper levels. The bomb has to be heavy. Judging by its size and construction, it has to weigh at least 150 pounds. Then there were the tools and hardware required to mount it to the floor like that. It had to have come in the main entrance from the basement. I made a mental note to talk to the detectives about this after we were finished. The night is hot. There is no air conditioning in the basement of the building, but it remains cool because of the big outer doors kept closed to keep out the heat. Except tonight. The fear of detonation has made it necessary to open every door, window, and vent to provide an escape for the bomb's blast wave in the event of detonation. Otherwise, you better believe it would blow the building for sure. The hot summer night sees our vulnerability and quickly blows in to visit its heat on us. I think back to the moments before I left home this morning and my wife laying there. She is beautiful, and I love her. I cannot wait to get home and wake her up. I feel a stirring in my loins as I think of her and calm myself. Then I remember the conversation at the poker game again, but it's not words this time that catch my attention. A clear vision of many sides of beef hanging from the ceiling on hooks. I can't shake it, and though I'm very fond of beef, what does beef have to do with right here, right now? I light a cigarette and look around. Then I see it. Hanging from the ceiling, 20 feet above our heads, like beef in the cooler, are drums. 55-gallon oil drums are suspended from the rafters in neat rows across the whole ceiling. There must be over 100 of them. Then it hits me like a ton of bricks. The bomber didn't need a big bomb because his bomb was only the detonator for the real bomb. All of those drums must be loaded with explosive material. I grab Gentry by the arm and head for the stairs. The nearest drum is several feet away, but we can see well enough what is written on the sides, and it's not good. The drums contain a powerful explosive component. Each drum is 5 times as powerful as the bomb below. The bomber doesn't intend to just blow up this building. He intends to create a massive crater in place of downtown. We inspect the drums quickly. They are suspended by nothing more than choke straps hung from the rafters. No wires or other electrical devices are found. Lieutenant Nelson is on the phone ordering in the large forklifts and a truck. We must get these drums out of here before the bomb goes off. If the bomb shield fails, it will cause enough damage on its own. But if these detonate, well, I wouldn't be making any long-range plans. My watch says it's now 4 a.m. We have 4 hours to remove the drums to a safe location outside the building and get the bomb shield installed. The truck with the bomb shield has just arrived, but we need to wait and install that last. It seems silly, but I can't have the clock on that device hidden until I know we have to cover it. Somehow, it's reassuring to be able to confirm it's not about to go off. As the first forklift comes in, I walk over to the bomb and stare at it. I realize I'm soaked with sweat, and it's not all from the heat. My mind is racing with the possibilities, and I've been thinking about the potential for damage. I'm pretty sure my home is outside the main blast radius, but I wish I could call my wife to warn her what may be coming. As a precaution, every cell tower and radio wave transmitter for 20 miles has been shut down to prevent the bomber from manually detonating the bomb. I am alone, and so is she. I want so bad to be with her, and wish I had taken the few minutes for us before I left. The forklift is reaching to the first barrel, and a man is standing on the forks to secure it and cut it loose. I watch as they secure the barrel to the lift before cutting the strap. Slowly the barrel is lowered to the floor and the bomb technician climbs off. So far, so good. The forklift operator raises the barrel to traveling height and turns to go to the truck. I look at the bomb. The steady countdown of the clock continues, and I'm relieved to say the least. I think that maybe I should be standing further away from the bomb, but it doesn't matter. Unless I'm at least 2 miles away, I'm in the blast zone while those barrels are here. I look back at the forklift in time to see him roll across a floor drain. The tractor lurches a little, but not enough to upset it. A loud whirring sound breaks the silence at the bomb, and I hear a noise that sounds like a fax modem trying to link up. My heart lurches as I look to the clock and see that it's now rapidly counting down. Holy shit. The seconds have transformed to hundreds, and the minutes to seconds. The hours are now minutes, and I have less than 4 of them to get this bomb disarmed, because it takes at least 15 minutes to install the bomb shield. I consider running away to save myself, but know it's no use. The barrels are still here, and I wouldn't get very far before the blast consumed me. The night is hot. One of those blistering, dark continuations of the dog days of August that let you know summer's got you by the balls, and you can't do anything but sweat it out. I jerk open my tool case and grab a pair of side cutters. I have to quickly figure out which of the wires coming from the timer is the trigger pulse or the power to the circuit. I study the wires, following the traces along the circuit board as I draw a schematic in my mind. I consider just ripping the timer wires out of the circuit board, but understand immediately that would be foolish. The person who built this bomb put in every other safeguard to ensure it could not be disarmed. There is no way he did not put a dead man connection on his timer. Sweat is now pouring down my face, and I'm aware that others have run over to see what's happening. Someone's talking, but I can't hear them. My mind is focused on the bomb and the schematic in my head. Another part of my mind is remembering the conversation at the poker table, as if there's something there that will help me in this situation. Maybe that's just part of the normal process, Stan, Jerry offered, which is why some folks who die suddenly and unexpectedly seem to hang around. Maybe it's necessary to know your whole life, and if you don't, you're confused, hanging around until you figure it out. Are we talking about dying, or have you changed the subject to ghosts now? Phil laughed. Because I wasn't no ghost. I stepped through the light and was gone. My mind is starting to clutter, and I'm getting angry from frustration in the heat. I want to lash out at someone or something. Anything to ease my mind so I can think straight. The timer reads 2 minutes, 33 seconds. I have traced 2 wires from the timer to almost identical looking circuits. Both circuits have a single 8-legged integrated circuit chip, and I'm damned if I know what they are. Electronics manufacturers use the 8-legged format for many types of circuits, and there are several of those that could be in this bomb. I study the circuits and decide they're basically the same. There is one difference in them, and if I can deduce which chip I'm looking at, I can make an educated guess at what the circuit does. The timer reads 1 minute and 1 second, and my side cutters are hovering back and forth between 2 wires. One of them is the trigger pulse. Of that I am sure. Unfortunately, the other is the dead man leg of the circuit, and cutting it means bypassing the timer straight to detonation. 43 seconds. And I'm sure the wire in my cutters is a trigger pulse, but I'm afraid to cut it in case I'm wrong. 36 seconds. And I'm holding my breath as I apply pressure to the wire. If I cut the wrong one, I'll never know it anyway. 3 seconds. I feel the cutters parting the wire as if it's my own skin. The light snick of the cutters seems explosively loud as my eyes remain on the clock. 1 second. The timer is stopped, and I let out a breath I've been holding. A loud whirring sound breaks the silence at the bomb, and I hear a noise that sounds like a fax modem trying to link up. My heart lurches as I look at the clock and see it's now rapidly counting down. The hours are now minutes, and I have less than 4 of them to get this bomb disarmed. I have a strange sense of déjà vu. I consider running away to save myself, but it's no use. The night is hot. One blistering dark continuation of the dog days of August that lets you know summer's got you by the balls. I grab a pair of side cutters. I have to quickly figure out which of the wires coming from the timer is the trigger pulse or the power to the circuit. I study the wires, following the traces along the circuit board as I draw a schematic in my mind. I consider just ripping the timer wires out, but it would be foolish. The person who built this bomb put a dead man connection on his timer. Sweat is pouring down my face and my mind is focused on the bomb, the schematic in my head. Another part of my mind is remembering the conversation at the poker table as if there's something there that will help me. Jerry offered, which is why some folks who die suddenly and unexpectedly hang around. Maybe it's necessary to know your whole life, and if you don't, you're confused, hanging around until you figure it out. Are we talking about dying, or have you changed the subjects to ghosts? Phil laughed. My mind is starting to clutter, and I'm getting angry from frustration. The timer reads 2 minutes and 33 seconds. I trace 2 pairs of wires from the timer to almost identical looking circuits. There is one difference in them, and if I can deduce which chip I'm looking at, I can make an educated guess at what the circuit does. The timer reads 1 minute and 1 second, and my side cutters are hovering. One of them is the trigger pulse. The other is the dead man. 43 seconds, and I'm sure the wire in my cutters is a trigger pulse. 36 seconds, and I'm holding my breath as I apply pressure to the wire. 3 seconds, and I feel the light snick of the cutters as my eyes remain on the clock. 1 second, the timer has stopped. A loud whirring sound breaks the silence, and my heart lurches. I look at the clock and see the hours are now minutes, and I have less than 4 to get this bomb disarmed. I have an overwhelming sense of deja vu. I consider running away to save myself, but know it's no use. The night is hot, one of those that gets you by the balls. I grab a pair of side cutters. I have to figure out which of the wires coming from the timer is the trigger pulse. I study the wires as I draw a schematic in my mind. I consider ripping the wires out, but the person who built this bomb put a dead man on his timer. Sweat is now pouring down my face, and my mind is focused on the bomb and the conversation at the poker table, as if there's something there that will help me. Which is why some folks who die suddenly and unexpectedly hang around. Maybe it is necessary to know your whole life, and if you don't, you're confused, hanging around until you figure it out. My mind is starting to clutter, and I'm getting angry from frustration. The timer reads 2 minutes, 33 seconds. I trace 2 wires, and I can make an educated guess. 1 minute and 1 second, and my side cutters are hovering. 43 seconds, and I'm sure the wire in my cutters is the trigger pulse. 36 seconds, and I'm holding my breath as I apply pressure to the wire. 3 seconds. I feel the light snick of the cutters as my eyes remain on the clock. 1 second. The timer is stopped. A loud whirring sound breaks my heart. I have an overwhelming, strange sense of deja vu. The night is hot. Sweat is pouring down my face, and my mind is focused on the conversation as there's something that will help me there. Which is why some folks who die suddenly and unexpectedly hang around. Maybe it is necessary to know your whole life, and if you don't, you're confused, hanging around until you figure it out. I look up from the bomb and see the light. My life flashes before my eyes, and though I try to slow it down to the last time I saw my wife, I'm pushed forward through that awful night to 1 second. The timer is stopped. I see debris around me. I see Gentry sitting close by, and he's crying. Lieutenant Nelson's walking away with his head hanging low. There are others. So many others, and all of them are walking away from me. I turn toward the light. I see the threshold, and I'm not afraid. Well, what'd y'all think about that one? Thank you for spending your time with me. If you like this story, how about giving me a like and consider hitting that subscribe? Tell me what you think in the comments, and I'll be sure to join the conversation. I'll be back next Friday with another tale from my collection. Until then, sleep well.